Hey, good morning guys, Anthony 4x4 Diesel. This video is going to be the quick version. We're not doing it, we're running through the general information, instructional type information on how to remove the head off the engine. Now it'll be general in a lot of ways because there's same information for in general for other vehicles also. But we're going to be specific with some information to the 1KZ, 1KD type thing, you know, a bit of a mix of between the two. So how to remove the head. First thing I'd like to say is obviously the 1KZ will be easier than the 1KD. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of let's paint a picture here that this engine is not the way it is. I just thought this was the best illustration, having an engine out of the vehicle with the head on. For those people that are not sure what the head is, just to be really clear, and we'll have more information soon about on engines and stuff, that's the head, right? Okay, so just quickly, you know, bang, right? So this is one just sitting there, literally just sitting there now because I just moved it. It's not even sitting on the dowels, there it is. So you got to remove the head. As long as you know you definitely got to remove the head. Why might you need to remove the head? Well, if you've got a 1KZ and you've had the glow plugs, you know, the tips go missing, and you've had what seems to be, you got a compression problem, whatever the case may be, catastrophic failure, you've got head gasket problems, cracked head problems, this sort of thing. Make sure you know what you're doing, as in why you're removing the head before you attempt to remove the head. Because the worst thing you want to do is create all that extra work and cost, even if it's your own time. It's still your time, you still got to buy head gaskets, head bolts and all that sort of thing. So, bada bing, just not usually necessary. With the 1KZ, obviously, there was a lot less of those than 1KDs. Let's just have a look at that for a minute. You know, they were in the 90 series and then they were in the early 120s, okay? So, although people think, oh yeah, the old reliable ones, and they are just as reliable, more or less, as a 1KD, but I wouldn't say any more reliable, maybe less. You know, they didn't make things better, didn't make things worse, they made things better. Now, this is what you got to think about to get your numbers right. They're just not as many of them. There never was, okay? So when you hear about, you know, problems, this and that, well, you got to look, well, how many of them are there? Okay, so it was quite, I shouldn't say common, definitely a common problem, the glow plug tips falling off in the 1KZ. It wasn't common if you change them regularly as recommended, you know what I mean? Obviously when it started happening, people that were working on those a lot, you know, guys in Toyota dealerships and that would see stuff like that, you know, the information got out, and obviously other workshops experienced that as well, and, you know, change the glow plugs, change the glow plugs, change the glow plugs. The other thing is, it wasn't a common problem either. I wouldn't call it a common problem, but something that did happen on the 1KZ heads, they did crack heads and stuff, right? So that's another reason. So there's two reasons there why a head would come off a 1KZ. No reason really why a head would come off a 1KD. Generally, there's no need for it. The only reasons people are generally pulling them off is when they've done cleaning these ports and stuff, got too much stuff in there and there's no compression. Not necessarily a good reason to pull the head off, but that's one reason. Another reason is they've tried to get these glow plugs out, right? And sometimes it's a bad idea on the 1KDs because we don't see problems with those, so we say leave them alone. Okay, we've said that before. It's not about that. That's in other videos. This one, removing the head. So if you started off with an engine that had the lid on it and everything and all the manifolds on, I'll just quickly run through the steps you would need to do. Obviously things like putting it on top dead center and disconnecting the battery is a good start, but we're not going to go for every little thing because the vehicle's not in front of us. It's not like, you know, there's going to be specifics to each engine, depending what's under the engine bay and that sort of thing, but in general, you need to do things like remove the intercooler, you know, if it's a Hilux or if it's a, you know, 120 Prado or 1KZ, anything like that. You're going to need to remove the intercooler and stuff across the top of the engine. Look, you can remove, you're definitely going to need to remove the valve cover. Let me just think about that. No, not on both ends. Let me think. Timing belt, cam. You need to get the cams out to get to the head bolts. So to get the cams out, yeah. So look, depending which engine, but in general, it's just going to be easier anyway because you need to get your timing belt off, but you can get your timing belt off. But to get to your head bolts, right? For example, these ones, you can see some of them are up top here like this, but some of them are down in there. And although you may be able to get to them without, you know, I don't know, I'm just trying to think actually. No, you need to get the camshafts out, guys, you really do. This is a 1KD, so definitely on a 1KD. You can have a look at a 1KZ if you like, but so your valve cover's definitely got to come off. So get the intercooler off, get your valve cover off either engine, right? You can remove heads with manifolds and, you know, and stuff like that on, but I just believe it's just too hard, and you're going to need them off to refit the head anyway, because it's too heavy. It's too risky to try and refit a head with all this heavy gear hanging off it. And people do it, I've seen it happen in workshops. I'm not a fan of it, right? So let's just do it the easy way, which is a bit more work. So on a 1KZ, I'd remove the exhaust manifold side, just completely take off. You know, if you need it, if you want to, you can just unbolt. So there's a couple of different ways to do things. You don't have to completely remove the exhaust manifold and the turbo from the engine bay. You can unbolt things and remove studs and just leave things sitting in place and remove heads from in between, like it's the meat in the sandwich. Or you can just take those things out, and technically the way we roll, we take them out, because we're going to take them out, check everything, clean everything, replace gaskets while we're out. We're going to, you know, we're going to get the turbo checked out, we're going to change gaskets, put a kit, you know what I mean, the gasket kit around that, because last thing you want to do is go that deep and do any major work and cut any corners and then, oh, I've got a bit of a leak where the turbo belt's onto the block or whatever, you know. Just so the way we would do it is intercooler off, valve cover off. We're going to get the exhaust and the turbo out. We're going to disconnect and get the inlet manifold out. Now on a 1KZ, I'll probably hopefully get all my letters mixed up, not. On a 1KZ, it's a lot easier to get the manifold off, okay? There's a few hard nuts and bolts and brackets down the back of the head and bits and pieces, but you just got to slowly work away at it and just get the manifold off. It's the easiest way. Get everything off till it looks basically like a bare head like that. Now, you know, why muck around, right? So as I said, have your timing marks at the front here set up. Then as per our other, it's always worth watching our other videos, especially videos in the VIP group, where we talk about, we always crack the bolt for the camshaft loose before we take the timing belt off, okay? Because it's only 98 Newton meters, but crack that way nothing can turn when it's not meant to, it stays in alignment. Not take it off, just crack it loose. Then you can take your timing belt off. So timing belt's got to come off obviously to lift the head, because the timing gear's here and it's connecting it all, so that's certainly got to come off. So timing belt, timing gear, camshafts out, then you're left with your bare head. You've got your manifolds off, right? And then you've got your head bolts. Now, a little bit important part about that, yes and no. There's procedures and torque specs and stages when removing and refitting heads. Now, if the head's stuffed, then it probably doesn't matter too much. But this is the way we roll on the more important stuff. Let's go with removing the head. Now, let's just quickly mention refitting a head. So when you refit a head, once you put it back on, you put your bolts in, and it talks about torquing up, sort of, you know, it'll give you a pattern, you know, you got to work with. Now, the whole problem with that is, to me, there's not enough detail there, because you could put these bolts in. I'm not even going to put any tension on these bolts around the center at all until all the bolts, I want all the bolts in, basically. Let's go finger tight, and then with a socket. And if you go in enough passes, right, it's common sense tells you that if you were to go and just, we're talking, you know, like, I don't know, 20, 30 degrees each, the head can't bend or warp, because you're doing it in so many passes it hasn't got the opportunity. So I still recommend using the pattern they say, but just do it in a lot more passes. That way all the bolts are in. If you're tightening down something here, this end can't bend up because the bolts are already, you know what I mean? They're all the way down. Head bolts, highly recommended new bolts each time you use them, okay? So I know people that reuse head bolts, and I'm sure you can get away with it on some engines, but is it worth it, right? And usually, depends what engine, you know, they're not that expensive really. So new set of head bolts every time you refit a head. Obviously a new head gasket, there's a whole procedure to measuring the clearance from the top of the piston to the to work out which gasket. There's a few different gaskets to choose from, so you need to do that accurately, professionally. So if removing the head, if refitting the head was important to use a certain pattern to stop the head warping and popping up at the ends, or whatever the case may be, wherever, then it's kind of similar to removing, and that's it. It's kind of opposite, you know, where you start at the outside. But don't be in my opinion, if the head's rubbish, it doesn't matter, you can do whatever you want. But if you're hoping to reuse the head, all right, you don't be the guy that just gets the rattle gun and goes zit, 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 right? So you sort of got to do So get your bar. You're going to need a bar anyway, most likely. They're pretty tight. I can't remember what they are, but they're F-tight. So you want to start off at the outsides, but just crack them loose a little bit, right? You don't need to crack them loose and undo them and then go to the next one. Just crack them all, get them all cracked with a bar a little bit, work your way around. Again, you can do from the outside to the middle, whatever you like. You're not turning it out that much that it matters. Do you understand what I'm saying? Just cracking it loose. Then, again, go over them again, whatever, and then you can get your, you know, rattle gun, whatever, and get them all out. Once all the pressure's off, it doesn't really matter. Now, where things are a bit different again, well, let's just keep it simple. So, yeah, that's it, guys. At the end of the day, that's how to get a head off. Then it's gonna be kind of like stuck to the block usually. So you're gonna need to get in there. There's usually a place where you can get your flat blade, whatever the case may be, in here, and just give it and just crack that seal loose. Carefully lift the head off. You want to look after that alloy head and the surface of the head like gold. So if you go place it on the bench, go and place it on a side that doesn't matter too much. You know, you can put it upside down, put this side on the bench, you know, maybe take those studs out, might help you as well before you do that. Okay, so it can sit flat on the bench, ideally on a piece of cardboard, little bit of a buffer for it. You're not going to damage these surfaces really anyway, not a big deal, but and then you can obviously have a look at what's going on there. So that's the short version of it. I don't know what else I can add in there without actually doing, I suppose, you know, next time, when we do a head removal, we can maybe do a video on that. But yeah, lots of videos, not as much time. It takes time to do these things. Luckily this time it's only been, well, so far 11 minutes. So I'm just trying to think what your questions might be out of what I've given you, because this is the short version, right? Some people want the short version. That's the short version, but some people are thinking, well, that didn't really help me that much. I want to see you take a head off the full video for 3 hours or whatever it is, right? Exactly. Well, if it's a 1KD and it's in the car, it's probably going to be longer than 3 hours, because it's going to be 3 hours just getting the intake side off the engine. So if we had a 1KZ, we'd probably get a head off in a few hours. Obviously, pulling things apart is a lot quicker than putting it back together, especially if you're not reusing those parts. If you know you've got a cracked head or something, most likely. Now, a little bit more information with a 1KZ, if you are looking at removing and replacing the head, it's pretty well known in the automotive industry. I don't know if it's a good rumor or a bad one, but excuse me, AMC heads is what a lot of people are using to replace the 1KZ head. All right, this is a 1KD, nothing wrong with them. Doesn't need to come off. If you've got a problem with a 1KD, on the very small percentage of engines that do that, it's probably got a cracked piston. Still not worth pulling the head off. We can confirm that just with the engine running. You know, you've seen the videos, oil cap off, chuff, 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 you know. That's a dead set 99.9% confirmation of a cracked piston. You can then confirm by looking at other things. But look, it'd be a waste of time to take the head off. My recommendation is a brand new long motor. You can't beat it, value for money. It comes complete, made in Japan, with injectors in there, comes with the pipes, comes with a water pump on the front, just like this one, and that's what happened with this engine and a number of others that we've replaced and organised to be replaced. So very small percentages with those with a 1KD, considering the numbers out there. I'd say the 1KZ glow plug or cracked head problem is a higher percentage per engine, if you know what I mean. And it all comes down to, if you recognise the problem, you can avoid the problems in both engines, and that is the 1KZ, you change these glow plugs every 100,000 Ks, okay? You keep the cooling system in Mickey Mouse condition to hopefully avoid cracking the head in the 1KZ. It's a bit of luck, but it's a better system in the 120. The cooling system works better than in the 90 series, so less occurrence in the 120 than there was in the 90. So again, as we've demonstrated, Toyota do improve things if they do find there might be a slight problem. With a 1KD, we believe, and it's clearly demonstrated by Toyota, and the information's out there, that the reason not only Toyotas, but pretty well all makes and models of small diesel engines crack pistons, as I've explained, big truck, it's like a brick, and wind resistance, you know, these engines, they're making a lot of horsepower, and as soon as something's not working right, you know, chips, tunes, or wrong combustion caused by injectors not working right. Old flogged injectors is what cracks pistons. It's well documented. If that's what happens, as I said, you know, you just need to get that new long motor. Ideally, if you're on a budget or you're pretty handy on the tools and you're going to do a rebuild, then actually this engine's for sale. It's only done 100,000 Ks and it's got a cracked piston from a Steinbauer chip. So there's a couple of people interested. Hit me with your offer. Text message, so it's pick up only from Melbourne. I'm not organising freight. there's a wooden crate that that it'll be sitting on, that it gets bolted to, right? There it is, so that wooden crate there, right? So that'll be a bada bing, right? And it sort of sits in that crate there. Excuse me. So I think that you know, whoever it is picking up, so a local thing, I'd probably bet anyone around Melbourne or Victoria that's handy with engines, that wants to build an engine, it's got one crack piston. I believe you could put one piston into it. I mean, there's the best way to do things and there's quick ways, but given it's barely just run in this thing, you'd obviously want to have a look at the other pistons, make sure they're all good, but I can't see any issues with them. And it did have the latest 110 pistons, so if you think, as I said, Toyota improved things, but we're getting a little bit off topic here, but look, you can go from this piston to that piston over the years, and they do try and, you know, they're trying to make the piston stronger, but it's just not that easy, and it's clearly proven. If Toyota can't just make indestructible pistons and other brands are cracking easier at lower Ks more often, then it's quite obviously, you know, a big car, small engine problem. It's a injectors, wrong combustion problem. It's a try and make more power out of this little engine problem, you know, chips, tunes, this sort of thing, right? It's pretty simple. Bigger bang, more force on the piston, that's where it splits straight over there, you know. Not a problem with the piston, guys, fairly obvious. So if you've got people telling you that, look, I don't know, you know, whatever. This was how to remove a head. So let's just quickly go over it again. Everything off the top first. Get your intercooler off, get your valve cover off. Just get your exhaust system and your turbo out of the way. Get your inlet and that out of the way, you know, undo all your bolts. You'll see that. On the 1KZ, it's kind of got two pieces to the manifold, I think, you know, so whatever, you know, just get that off. It's really easy to get a manifold off a 1KZ. A lot of guys doing it themselves, so you'll figure that out. Obviously, you need to disconnect all your wires and plugs and bits and pieces. We're not going to go through every specific nut and bolt and bits and pieces, although we could do that in a minute. But again, make sure the timing's right. Timing belt, crack the bolt loose, timing belt off, bang, gear off. Again, actually, excuse me, when you're releasing these, the rocker gear on the camshafts, I like to do it in a number of passes as well. Very important, in my opinion. I'm not sure what the book says, I can't remember, but look, basically, you're pushing valves up and down, so some of them, depending where the camshaft position is, some are going to be pushing on valves, some aren't. So in my opinion, it's not a matter of just going zzz, 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 or anything like that. I'll just do a number of passes, right? And again, they'll probably tell you to start from the middle, working out, and opposite, whatever. Not so important. More important, in my opinion, just use your common sense. Do it evenly, okay? Nice and evenly. That means in many passes. That means you might put your socket on and off that same bolt 20 times, right? Slow down, take your time, many passes. Same when you put things back together, like these valve covers, right? You don't just go around, you know. I like to leave the corners to last. Why? Because that's where we see the cracks in covers at the back corners. I believe people over-tightening. There's a lot of flex in a new gasket. You need to go down, you know, I'll sort of do a few here, up and down there. I'll go to the corners, but always less pressure on the corners. And then once there's a crush washer on the 1KD valve covers, right? And others, but anyway, when I feel that touch, these are going to touch afterwards. And then, of course, so we'll do it by hand, and then just, you know, check it with a torque wrench anyway. So pretty straightforward on the 1KZ, luckily, for someone that's got a 1KZ that's pulling a head off, because it's probably more likely. With a 1KD, there's a lot more work involved. As I said, you can do the manifolds off, manifold on if you like. Look, we won't go to the exhaust side. That's pretty straightforward. You can see most things. You've got to undo nuts and bolts, man. If you're going to take the turbo and the exhaust off and all that, right? Yeah, it's still a big job, don't get me wrong. It's a big job. There's plenty of work there, and the more you fluff around, the longer it'll take. So don't fluff around too much. But on the inlet side, okay, let's look at that. Yeah, you know, you work your way down to E-jar off, E-jar cooler off. The manifold, it's pretty straightforward. You've got a couple of bolts underneath, they're a bit hard to see. There's some clips, there's a clip here, there's a wiring loom down about here that once you undo the manifold, you pull it back about 10 mil, and then you can stick your big flat blade down there, and there's a black plastic plug around about here on a bracket, and you can get the screwdriver in behind that, and that'll release the tab, and you'll be able to push the plug down, so the plug and the wire just stays there, and that bracket, that piece of metal, just comes up and comes off with a whole manifold. And there's a couple of vacuum lines down the bottom, right? A green one and a white one. You get those from underneath. Just carefully get those off. Take your time not to damage them, okay? Of course, you've got a fuel return line outside of that and some bits of insulation. You'll figure it out, guys, you know. It just takes time. Take your time. If you're doing it the first time, that's what you need to do. Take your time, step by step. We haven't got a video pulling heads off yet. There you go, it even rhymes. Take your time, step by step. We haven't got a video pulling heads off yet. And I even said it a second time without mucking it up. So, look, that's about it, really. What am I forgetting? I don't know, drain your coolant before you bring the vehicle into that workshop, wherever you're going to, you know. You don't want to have too much coolant and that, whatever. So we like to do that outside, you know, catch it in the tray, give it a good blowout, so you haven't got any coolant dripping, messing up. You know, you're going to get a bit anyway when you lift the head off a little bit, might go under the cylinders and that. Just get, you know, get a nice absorbent cloth and soak that up if you like. And then, you know, give it a bit of a clean up. You can have a look around, see what you want to do. What else can I tell you? On the 1KZ, there is some brackets on the back of the head here. A couple of 10 mils are very tight. Make sure you use quality tools and take your time to get to those. So sometimes they can snap off as well, so that's a problem. If you're pulling the head off, not a big deal because you can deal with that, all right? Once it's off. What else? I don't know. New head bolts when you put it back together. New head gasket, of course. New inlet manifold, new exhaust manifold. Get the turbo kit. Over here you've got your fuel return. This is obviously the fuel return for the injectors on the 1KD comes around, and the back of the fuel return goes into there. You need all your washers for that when you put it back together, and there's another washer that comes out here, which in our injector kits we supply that with the inlet manifold. For those people that want it, this little gasket here, you need that. Single use only, like the ones inside there. Geez guys, I don't know. That's pretty well as much information as I can give you by looking at it and trying to describe what you need to do. If you got something out of that, give us a thumbs up, and hopefully you did. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn that bell on so you don't miss the next important bit of information. It might just be a video removing a head off one of these engines. Similar information for all other engines, guys. You know, with how you remove or install items that you don't want to have bend and damage, sort of thing, you know. So really, heads is one of the really important things. That's got to be super clean, super flat, no dropping it on, missing in the dowel, hitting the surface of the head or anything like that. It's bring it in, precision, two people if you can, lowering it down slowly, making sure you got it 100% in the right position, and it goes on the dowels. Beautiful. There's a couple of dowels there. See, that's why this isn't, you know, it doesn't move. You can hear the, oh no, that's probably the engine stand, but anyway. Whatever, bada bing, we're out of here. Thanks for watching, thanks for your support. Catch you soon, see ya.